Hi, I'm Julie, and this is Toto, and we're here because I love this book, the Bible. It has changed my life, and I hope it changes yours too. So what are we waiting for, Toto? Let's get going. We're back, and we're here, Toto, on our new porch, your favorite new place on these hot summer days, and we're here with a new lesson, and this one is on the fruit of the Spirit. And it seemed like a perfect launch after our study of the Holy Spirit, because as the Holy Spirit takes up residence in you, the fruit of the Spirit will start coming out in your life. People will notice a difference in you. So we're going to talk about that today. And first of all, we're going to talk about where can we find these fruit of the Spirit in the Bible. And it's found in Galatians 5:22 through 23. And the fruit of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And so those are the fruit of the Spirit. And one thing to notice right off the bat is it's fruit, singular, not fruits. These are all characteristics that make up the fruit. They're all very interconnected. In fact, the Greek word karpos is singular. And what it means is it's actually this evidence, this result. It can mean harvest. It can mean yield. But it says in the Bible Hub translation, in the interlineal translation, that it's a true partnership with Christ, that our lives are in union with Christ, and that we're living his life through ours, and this is the yield that is eternal. And so again, it's the result of the Holy Spirit living in us. And, often people say, well, are you a Christian? Or he's not a Christian, or she's not a Christian. Well, you will know someone is a Christian by the fruit in their lives. In fact, in Matthew chapter 7, it talks about false prophets. And it starts in verse 15, chapter 7, and it says, watch out for false prophets. And we know that because they're everywhere in our world today. It says, watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. But by their fruit, you will recognize them. And that is the fruit of the Spirit of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, goodness, faithfulness, and self-control. And so we'll recognize, you don't ever have to tell someone you're a Christian. They should see it in your lives. But this fruit, we have to know, it's a growth process, just like fruit on a tree, right? It doesn't happen overnight. And it's a maturity, and it's a growing in our faith. And these fruit will start coming out, and people will notice, because we know that anyone can call themselves a Christian, but we need to see it in people's lives. And I remember that song in Sunday school, that you'll know you are Christians by your love, they will know you are Christians by their love. And it's the same sort of thing. And by the way, love is the first fruit of the Spirit we're going to talk about in the next lesson. So where do we find this fruit of the Spirit in the Bible? It's in the letter to the Galatians, and Paul, the Apostle Paul, wrote this letter to help defend his authority and to also clarify doctrine, because back in the early church where Paul started these churches, there, of course, just like in the church today and culture today, there's always people trying to pull things away, or false prophets that are showing up trying to lead the people astray. So Paul wrote this letter, and it's very interesting because we always want to look at the context. And the context of the fruit of the Spirit in chapter 5 is that Paul first talks about the contrast with the flesh. And so we've got the flesh and we've got the Spirit. And as Christians, we want to live in the Spirit, not in the flesh. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But one thing that's really important to know, and I always say this to my kids, it's not what you're reading, it's who you're reading. Who is the person who wrote this? And if you know anything about the Bible, you've heard of the Apostle Paul, who actually didn't start that way. He was the persecutor of Christians named Saul until God had an encounter, or direct encounter with him on the road to Damascus, blinded him, redirected him, and he became a great apostle, and known as the apostle to the Gentiles. So he's starting these new churches all over the place. And Paul knew what it was like to be persecuted and to suffer, and he was steadfast. And so we see him, and he writes these letters to encourage the church and to clarify doctrine. And in Galatians 5:19, he talks about, now the works of the flesh are evident. And so this is what we as Christians, as we live in a sinful world, and we're drawn to temptation, into things of the flesh. And he mentions sexual immorality, idolatry, sorcery, strife, jealousy, fits of anger. Anyone have fits of anger? I mean, he mentions everything: divisions, envy, drunkenness. And then he says in verse 22, 5:22, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And so again, those are the things that we're striving for. But we can't just get these fruit. I mean, just like with trees and fruit on trees, it doesn't happen overnight. It's something that grows in you. So how do we grow this fruit? Well, in Galatians, Paul tells us in chapter 5 again, in verse 16, he says, but I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. So walk by the Spirit, and ends by saying you be led by the Spirit. And so again, this walk, it's a step at a time. You don't just wake up one day, all of a sudden you're more loving and you're more gentle and you're more patient or more peaceful. This is a growth process, and it's a walk, one step at a time, as we walk with the Lord and we spend more time with Jesus. And that's what I do on this porch every morning. I spend time with the Lord. And that helps me walk and look more like Christ slowly. He's slowly transforming me as I spend more time with him. Because we know, of course, anyone can act more loving, and they can be good or kind for a short time, but it's when things go bad, when our faith is tested, and this transformation will withstand. We will be steadfast because we're not standing alone. We're standing and walking with the Lord, because we know that this transformation cannot happen. We can't make it happen. It just happens when the Lord is living us. We are slowly transformed, but we can't transform ourselves, because we know anyone can be happy, right? We can be happy on these beautiful summer days. We can be peaceful on vacation, walking on the beach. But what happens when things are not going so well? That's the true test, and that's why we need to be walking with the Lord, so we can have these fruit of the Spirit through good times and bad. And again, Paul is such a great example. The book of Philippians is called the book of joy, and it's because Paul has joy beyond his circumstances, and he wrote it from prison. So he is literally chained to a guard, and he is speaking of this unbelievable outpouring of joy. And I encourage you to read the book of Philippians, and so you can see how Paul embodies this fruit of the Spirit of joy. And so we are going to unpack each of the fruit in the coming lessons. So I hope you tune in, and our first one will be on the fruit of the Spirit, love. So tune in. We hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.